Hi. Hello, everyone. I'm Hidan Chung, President of League of Women Voters, and welcome to our League of Women Voters General Information Meeting on the Citizen Nominating Committee election held on November 12th, 2024. Our consensus meeting on this topic will begin immediately after the general information session. A consensus meeting portion is only for members of the League. If you are not a member and would like to join, you may do so at this time. The League of Women Voters of Scarsdale is a volunteer, nonpartisan political organization that promotes political responsibility through informed and active participation of citizens in government. The League is nonpartisan in that it does not support or oppose any candidate for public office. It is political in that it takes positions on selected governmental issues after member study and consensus. I will now turn over the program to Diane Baylor and Beth Bouguer, our lead CNC election portfolio chairs, and they will introduce our panel to conduct today's information session. Okay.
And Beth is going to lead the information session, so take it away.
Okay, so Diane, I'm going to just make an observation before we start that neither you nor Ralph are on camera.
I see them both.
You do? Okay, they're just.
I think you gotta swipe it. They're in the LWVS camera.
I think Beth is on her phone. That's why she can
Yeah,
see.
okay. It could be, if it's just a phone issue, then that's not a problem. I just see arms. Arms. Great. Hey, so I would like to introduce briefly Ralph Greer and Heath Sroka, who have graciously agreed to be here with us today and to share how the procedure committee of CNC has worked over the past year. And there have been a lot of things that worked great, and there are a few things that we'd like to learn a little bit more about. Each of them served 3 years in CNC and then went on to serve additional years in leadership. So thank you for your volunteerism. That's fabulous. Yes. Is there anything you would like to add to this as complete report before we get started?
Not really. I think it covers mostly everything. First, we just want to thank everyone, on the league just for their support through the process. It's been, obviously it's a fun process, and it takes a lot of people and a lot of help. And we just want to say thank you for all your help and support throughout the process. So we think overall we accomplished most of our goals. And the number one goal really was this year to have a contested election in every district. And through everyone's hard work in the PC, especially Ralph and myself, we got there. I think Green Acres, we had actually double the amount of people. So this was the first fully contested election in a number of years. Voter turnout, even despite it being an election year, and there's some voter fatigue, with the presidential election, highest turnout in 5 years. So I think we're moving in the right direction, and I'm pretty sure Ralph is going to continue to take this in the right direction, and we'll continue to build on this. So I think overall we're very happy. We learned a little bit along the way. Some things will change for next year. And I know I do roll off, but I will still be helping out any way I can and supporting the process going forward. So, and if Ralph wants to add anything, feel free.
Well said, Keith. And I'll say publicly, it's been a pleasure working with you. The level of professionalism that Heath brought to the program, the process, and the execution started early in the cycle and goes even now. So we'll be talking about a few of the initiatives we have scheduled between now and the next cycle. I think that'll be important, mostly in the fundraising arena. But Heath has brought knowledge, expertise, and efficiency to it that I hope to emulate next year.
Excellent. And thank you both. This has been definitely the most exciting year for CNC elections that I remember here in Scarsdale. So appreciate it. Like to start back a little bit about the procedure committee, and just as forgive me for being a bit of a neophyte here. This is my first year on the league, so if I'm asking stuff that you guys have covered 1,000 times, Ames, please bear with me. But I'm just curious, how many of the 10 people who were to complete their third year on CNC continued to serve onto the PC this year?
Yeah, technically no one dropped off except for Brian Kulang, who dropped off because he actually ran again. He only had a 1-year term on the
Okay.
CNC, and there was a significant amount of support from existing CNC members to get him to rejoin. So that's always a positive thing. So
That's awesome.
Brian was the outlier. Yeah, but otherwise, yeah, everyone else rolled over.
How do you recruit the remaining members for that?
A lot of begging.
Okay.
Yeah,
A-
yeah, we really pushed to the existing PC members to recruit whoever they could. Um, it's an interesting role, I'd say, to be honest, because when you're recruiting people who haven't served on the CNC, they don't really know what they're doing or what their role is. It's much easier to get CNC members. So even trying to get some past CNC members as well. And then it's for a lot of people, it's just a light introduction to the process. So I'm hoping that some of the PC members actually that joined maybe good candidates for Ralph next year for the CNC as well, because they got a little taste of what happens. But yeah, it's really about, we put out, you put out the requests in the various publications that we have. I'd say you get very, very limited response there, unfortunately. So that's something that we're trying to figure out better ways to engage the community that just don't know about this. But the best is going to be calling everyone and you're really asking them to step up.
that makes sense. And when you're doing this, seems that you would have a good demographic breakdown by elementary, but do you pay attention to age, gender, or different realms of civic engagement to try to get at that very broad group of people on the PC to then have a broader group of candidates for CNC for the next year?
Keith, before we jump onto that question, Beth, if I just pause for a moment.
Please.
In my experience working the CNC, and I'm sure some members in the room here have been there at one point or another, the actual procedure committee and the role of the volunteerism beyond the CNC is not always well explained to those members of the CNC as they sit in the room deciding on candidates and discussing the aspects of the CNC which are most important. And it's usually at the last 5 minutes of the final meeting when they say, who wants to be the chairperson for the campaign this year? Who wants to continue on and be the president for the procedure committee next year? I would encourage the chair people for the CNC to spend more time to help illuminate what the responsibilities are beyond the actual work of the CNC, because we did have some drop off in engagement for those people who had been in the CNC and then matriculated onto the procedure committee. And I don't think that's necessary. I think that we can still engage people in the room, build some momentum for the procedure committee, build some momentum into recruiting candidates, and have a more contested elections if we just get the CNC activated in a more direct manner. So I wanted to share that observation. I'm not sure how you go about putting that into bylaws, but certainly I think the sentiment should be expressed to the chairs. And Scott and Raju, I should say, the chair, and Scott and Heath and I will all have a conversation about this at some point. But I do think that, some of the volunteer energy is lost in that transition.
Thank you for that education. That's very helpful for me. Absolutely.
I can jump into your question if
Yeah,
you want real
please.
fast.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd say yes. I'd say, but there's two aspects, right? It's recruiting for the PC, and then I'll answer recruiting for the CNC as well, right? Because they sort of go hand in hand, and it's a fine line of you don't want to pull someone into the PC that could be a good CNC candidate as well, right? Because you're pulling from the same pool. So yes, I think on the PC it was really about finding people who could help us out and also expand the reach to get CNC members as well. So you really want to get from all the different school districts, and you really want to try and get from every age demographic you can. We tried our best there. I'd say in our CNC recruitment, we definitely stepped it up a little bit. One thing we did rely on this year, I think that was actually pretty helpful, and I recommend to continue it, is the neighborhood associations, right? Because those are people who are already signing up to do something, even if it's small, to participate in their neighborhood. So we reached out to all of the heads of all the neighborhood associations and really encourage them, like, give me a list of 10 people that you think could run. And, so it was less of a cold call and, reach out to people who they thought were active, which was helpful. And I think that was able to help diversify, our demographic a little bit. It's a fine line there. And I'm sure, even in the CNC, they walk a fine line of, are you supposed to not discriminate, but, really try and get all different demographics and age and everything, or should it be blind and just, whoever the best person for the job is? So I think we really tried to get a good group of people to represent as much as we can, and really just to get as many people as we can, right? We wanted this to be, competitive, and we got there. So Ralph, feel free to add any of that. We can't hear
Yeah,
you.
no,
You're
that,
mute. You're mute. You guys are on mute.
Rukaya, we can't hear the room.
Hi, guys. For some reason, it's not working here.
Now we can hear you.
We lost one connection to the Zoom, so we're reconnecting the Zoom because the recording, we think, stopped. So either we froze, we could see you still talking and lips moving, but we couldn't hear you. So
Can we record on that one and just record to the computer? Sorry about this.
they are back in. So now we can mute this one.
Recording in progress.
Okay.
You guys can hear me now? I'm not sure where I left off, but Beth got it all.
Yes, yes. Well, and so given and time, I just want to move on a little bit at you guys has had a great smooth transition this year, or just wanted to point that out. But you did talk about trying to use a Google form for the bios for next year, and I think that's a fabulous idea. I was wondering, do you guys utilize Google Drive or other platforms for collaboration within the PC or the CNC?
Yeah, we store a lot of the docs on Google Drive, and I did create a new email address, which I'm going to try and get all the documents actually onto that email address, because there's a big issue of transferring. It's a 1-year term, right? So transferring from one person to the next. So the goal here is I'm going to create a new email address. We do have an email address with, whoever's hosting this website that is still, we're trying to figure out a little bit of this mystery, because we can't control the email address. But I'm going to create a Gmail. I did create a Gmail. We're going to actually store all the documents on there, and I'm going to transfer that onto Ralph, and we're going to share the password, and we're going to keep transferring that onto the next person. Be a much easier way to transfer all the history, all the communication. We'll have, a full history of that as well. So that should be much smoother going forward.
That sounds really great. When you do recruit people for the PC, do you do it ever with an eye for somebody who can be your tech guru for the year?
I play that role this year.
You play, so not when you are that person, but
I feel like even though we're going to try to find someone for next year, I will stay on, and I will support Ralph on that as well going forward. And then once we get this to a really much smoother operation, hopefully I can hand it off, but I'm willing to invest some time here and continue it.
Sounds great. Thank you so much.
Ralph,
Next,
you're on mute. You're on mute. We still can't. One of you guys are both on mute.
Go ahead.
there you go.
I don't know.
It's good, it's working.
You there?
Do it with the screen, you do it with the.
Now we're good.
It's working, guys, don't.
Yeah, we're contacting-
I just said Abby on board with that plan as well, Heath, because when she dropped off all her stuff the other day, she seemed really definitive.
I mean, I had those bags sitting in my office for a couple of weeks. I got yelled at every day, so
Gotcha.
I would have kept them all year, Ralph.
Yeah, well, the nice thing about it is too, keep in mind, Keith and I have known each other for a couple of years. Through our youth lacrosse thing, our kids have played
Mhm.
lacrosse together, we've coached each other. So I think that really helped to kind of define our relationship and just our communication style from an early onset. And so I'm not sure, what we can do towards team building, but I can see just that given the fact that there is so much information transferred year over year from the chairperson to the vice chairperson, there's no, institutional knowledge that passes hands. There's two people who do a lot of work. And so within that, there are a lot of give and takes, hundreds of emails that go through, and eventually problems come up. And having a relationship in place smooths over a lot of those gaps that can become choppy in such a condensed time cycle that we're kind of working on. So I don't know how we address that, but it is an observation, we benefited from some common touch points.
No, that it sounds like you guys had a very successful working relationship, and it showed this year. Here, one of the things that came up a few times, Ames, in your answers was a Dropbox, and I was wondering if you guys could talk to us a little bit about what the procedure timeline for the discussion and potential implementation and for a Dropbox for mail-in ballots.
Yeah, we talked about it. I mean, here's the issue is that we have is that this isn't a town event, right? It's not it's not a town thing. So having a Dropbox at the town raises some issues, right? That was our concern. And then, do we have it at the library, but then it's sort of unmonitored. So we're still brainstorming, trying to figure out the best way. We're open to some suggestions. Also, I think we were open to accepting drop-offs at the library too, the day of, which is easier, right? Because if people have them, they can drop them off, for their spouse or something. But it's a fine line of having the Dropbox sitting unattended outside the town, right? Because at least when they come through the mail, at least they're postmarked who they came from. Where if you start getting Dropboxes, it just whatever. And I mean, I'd have to say the mail-in ballot participation, it's there. I mean, you could see it in the report we sent. It's not huge, and you could tell, that the people who had the most mail-in ballots they went on an active mail-in ballot campaign, right? Where they said to their friends, here's the mail-in ballot, like you got in the mail, please vote for me. It was definitely more concentrated to the people who I would assume they had bigger outreach. So we're discussing it. We'll try and figure it out, but still up in the air for now.
Would implementing that require an amendment of the nonpartisan resolution?
It's that's still up in the air and how you read it. I don't.
Okay.
I would think that you can do it without it, but I'm told that it should be somewhere in there. So, we'll get on that this year, and hopefully, if we decide it does, it will be in there for next year. So then the Dropbox will be the year after.
That sounds perfect. Thank you. So moving along to recruiting CNC candidates you've already mentioned about how the neighborhood associations were very helpful, and I think that's a brilliant idea. I was wondering, have you considered utilizing a broader social media presence and on I know that there were things posted on Scarsdale Buzz, but either having a full-on Facebook page or other platforms. Some of the younger moms are not on Facebook with me, but on Instagram or whatever.
Yeah, we haven't really talked about that, but maybe something that we could think about in the future. I'm trying to think even like on an Instagram, like we'd have to create our own just to get the reach. It would be interesting. Um, yeah, something we'll talk about that, but it's something that we really haven't considered.
I do think that it speaks just to the loss of the local paper. I think we felt
Mhm.
that so many different levels in the town, and there's not been anything that's just really filled the gap for a local paper. We did reach out to other social organizations, the Scarsdale Asian Society of Scarsdale, such that it is, no response there. There was other efforts made to reach out to other groups, and response back was minimal. A lot of the work that goes into the CNC is a personal touch point. It was really successful in recruiting people, asking other people with a relationship to volunteerism in the community, especially because when it comes down to the actual campaigning, there is, when you have a great candidate when they actively get their petitions on board and they have a broad base of support. When you have a tentative yes and the petition comes in late and you're kind of asking for it at the last minute. And then you have, we had a few candidate calls where we said, join us to talk about the process of running an election. Here's what you should think about. And if those aren't well attended, you kind of know where your candidates are going to be. And it showed up in the voting numbers as well. So engaged candidates are much better than a broader base of candidates.
That makes complete sense to me. Hey, thank you. Looking at the actual election and this year, the numbers were great, but it seems that there are some issues at the polling place as for finding individuals on the voter rolls on the day of. And so I was wondering whether you guys have had conversations with the school district about obtaining voter rolls alphabetically by individual or electronically searchable to kind of alleviate that, and what your procedure is to handle provisional ballots on the day when this does come up.
Yeah, so alphabetical doesn't really work because depending on who the first person on the taxpayer record is for the school. So someone will come in and say their name, and sometimes it's under their spouse's name. So we try and get through that. And what we did as a if we weren't able to find it, we were using the Scarsdale directory online, where you can look up tax records and you can see who the owner of the house is and what school district they live in, and verifying it that way. So as much as like the school district census is helpful, we may be better off just to, not even using that going forward and just, utilizing their website and going straight to that. So it's all available on the website as long as, the house is closed, and, the deed has been transferred. So we went through that a little bit, but we still like to go through the paper ones first. And if they weren't in there, then we verified online. And we also wrote their name down, so we did track it. But I think the biggest issue we had probably were with people with kids that weren't in the school system yet. For some reason, they're not showing up on the census that the school provides. Yeah, interesting to see if you have
Yeah.
other issues and other votes. If you hear similar things like whether it's Scarsdale School Board or even in the general election, if they have similar issues.
They have similar issues.
Okay, we're not alone.
No, but if you guys solve this, then hopefully that can get disseminated and vice versa. So thank you. That was useful. And my last question about the election is: did you guys receive any ballots this year into the PO box after the election deadline?
We did. We did receive a couple. Uh, some were routed through White Plains. Some were mailed a little bit late. But anecdotally, there were none of the elections were close enough where that would have made a difference, which for us, that's positive. But yeah, we have to, you know, as it's a fine line of the calendar is very condensed of when you finally get that final person in, getting the letter to Printcraft, getting it out in the mail, and then getting him back. So, you know, we'll try and get that a little bit faster. But yeah, it's definitely condensed. And also this year, the election was, I think, 2 days earlier than it was last year as well. And we do it the Tuesday after the election, and then but the signatures and everything are due month end no matter what. So it does shift there a little bit. So we lost 2 days.
Got it. It seemed that you guys did a good job of highlighting what needed to happen and on the materials that went out. So I just was wondering how effective that was this year. And the last question I have is, and you alluded to this earlier, was about your fundraising efforts, that you had some good plans. And so what can you share with us?
Yeah. So the bank account balance, I'll just update you because I haven't sent an update. We're right around like $5,200. We owe Printcraft some money. Net of that, we're going to be a little bit north of 3,000, and then we're going to go initiate a marketing campaign to raise some money. We do a mailing. We have a list that we've used for several years. We'll continue that. We send it out to about 250 people. We probably get about 20 people back. So it's a pretty, I'd say it's a lower hit rate. We have a QR code now that links directly to our PayPal. We've always had a link to PayPal, but now the QR code just makes it easier. That's going to go out in the mailing. And then Ralph and I are working hard, and I'll give Ralph most of the credit for this, compiling an email list. Because it's great mailing it out, but like it costs a decent amount of money. You're spending several $100s to raise several more $100s, right? So if we can work out a much better email list, especially with the QR code and a link, I think that would be much more highly effective, right? And as much as there's certain people who like to write checks and we get those checks every year and we appreciate them, there's also certain people who just want to click a couple buttons and send it through PayPal and be done with it. So I'm hoping that we get a better turnout. And we're going to solicit, fundraising from the CNC and existing PC members as well. And we really need a list of all prior CNC members, right? It's a decent amount of people. And the people who have at least committed their time and effort to this, I think should be supportive of, even if it's a small amount of money, donating something. So I'm confident that this year's fundraising is going to be as successful, more successful than last year. And I think the digital effort should help us out as well.
No, that sounds great. Right.
We'll send it to you guys too. Don't worry about it.
Looking forward to it. At this point, would love to open things up to the floor. And Diane, can you control that?
Yes, so I will call on people. Do we have shows the audience or should we just turn this one around?
You can do that too, whatever.
Okay, so I'm gonna turn this around. And if anyone has any questions, raise your hands. I'll call on you.
I don't know if it matters.
Yeah, don't worry about that. Jenny, go ahead.
I had two questions. When you were reaching out to neighborhood associations, were you just having them distribute to their members, like emailing, or they were actually talking to people and like how were they helpful, I guess is my question.
We sent out a blanket email to all of them, and without naming any names, some people were much more responsive than others. And some people were very supportive, and some people honestly didn't respond at all. So it was definitely a mix. I sent it out a couple times. I followed up, and then the people who were supportive and engaging, some of them just forwarded it on to their group of people, is what they told me, and some of them were very proactive in providing me a list of 10 names. So I asked specifically, I'm like, give me a couple names of people who you think we should reach out to, and some people were very good with that. Surprisingly, after it was already done, I got more responses of people wanting to help out. And I'm like, we already filled it's already done. So like the signatures were due last week, but thanks for reading the emails. So I think we'll actually get on that a little bit earlier next year as well.
Thank you. And then my other question was, with the SPNC election coming much earlier this year, does that affect you positively or negatively in terms of recruiting? Is there any thought of combining the elections in the future to increase turnout, or is it like, did it matter? Were you aware that it was moved earlier?
didn't really make a difference. We didn't hear much feedback on that as well. No one told us that they weren't. I think one person that said they were involved in the school board, but it was actually limited overlap. And yeah, I don't think it affected our turnout. I'm wondering, we were after it, right? So I don't think it changes much.
Again, I think so much of this is like that personal, we saw people who ran campaigns. They won their elections because they expanded their networks, both in the write-in campaigns as well as showing up. I think we had the biggest turnout from, was it Heathcote that we've had in years. One of them, we doubled the numbers and tripled them in some cases for voter turnout. And I think that was a direct result of people asking for support.
Yeah.
And so, on a larger basis, look, we've all done, I ran a campaign with BK and John Mark for CNC, and that's a totally different animal. This was a harder campaign to run than a CNC trustee election, I think, on an individual level, just what's asked from the chair and vice chair, because there's not a lot of delegating. That's one area where we really need to focus and effort to consistently recruit. Now, I'm not sure if this group has any influence there, but it's something to deeply think about. How do we maintain that institutional knowledge? Because there are opportunities for someone to affect change within the CNC with a concerted effort over 2 or 3 years to get the right people on that board, which would then have an effect on the trustees, not in a long period of time. If someone paid attention for 3 years and they got their candidates on, you'd feel it. So we need more help recruiting.
Other questions? I will ask a question then. In terms of your website updates, do you have a schedule or a plan of what information should be posted on there for the public to see, versus I understand there is a password protected section just for CNC or procedure committee members?
We were updating the website as we got new information. So whenever we had updated documents, we did update it. We tried to stay on top of that. So the website's run by the forum, I'm pretty sure. So I think that's one area that needs improvement. I think I think there needs to be maybe more of a forum, I guess, webmaster who can really handle all this. Even I know we're talking to the CNC a little bit because they have to update stuff too. And there's one person who is handling it now who I'm not sure if that's his role or he just sort of, no one else is doing it and he's doing it. So we need to better handle that. We did not utilize the password protected area. Any documents that we needed to share with the PC members, we did it through the Google Drive. It's just much easier. I think the website was created at a different time when there weren't these other options available that were as easy. So, we're probably going to utilize Google Drive going forward and not the website. And honestly, the website, we just, when things are updated, we send them and we get them posted. I'd love to see the traffic of how many people actually go to the website. I'm probably the #1 hit there for people who have actually used it. But that's probably something that we have to focus on maybe across not just PC and CNC, but all the various areas in Scarsdale. We have these websites. I'm not sure how many people are actually using them, and because they're not Scarsdale, sanctioned websites, right? These are their own entities, they're outside entities. So I don't know, maybe we figure out a group to put together, representative from each, you probably touch the most of these different groups. So maybe if we figure out how to put together a group of everyone and get everyone in a room together, and maybe we can come up with a better solution for the website and how we distribute information to the town. That could be a good initiative for next year.
So a follow-up on that. So for things like the CNC candidate recruitment materials that include the petition and
Yep.
information about the schedule, the meeting schedule and so forth, how was that disseminated to people who had not committed yet to run for CNC, but were willing to consider running for CNC.
If you're willing to consider running for CNC, one of the PC members distributed that material. It was available on the website. It was also available. So we also linked through 10583 shared a link as well. And I think Scarsdale Buzz as well. And then I don't know what they're calling it now, but the Scarsdale Bulletin, whatever,
The
that.
official. The
Sure, yeah.
Scarsdale
That,
official. Yes.
there's another one too, right? There's another one that
Special.
sends out blurbs. I don't know. I subscribe to. I get some blurbs about the town. But-
Insider.
Insider.
I think you're talking about the Scarsdale official that
Is that
comes
what it's called?
from
Okay.
the government.
Got it.
Uh,
Yeah. Okay. Scarsdale
yeah.
official then. Yeah. So so we had links to it. Again, we don't have the data in place to find out to get reports. Like right now you can get most websites you get report analytics, right? Who clicked it, how many people clicked it, how many people downloaded it. We don't have that. So that would be great to know in the future, but I don't think many people utilize it. Again, as Ralph has reiterated, this election process is really about, reaching out to your network, forcing them to look at the documents, forcing them to download them, forcing them to get signatures. And, that's pretty much it. So
I do think that there's also, a shift in the mindset for volunteerism in Scarsdale. I think, we see it at a bunch of different levels. There was great interest. And we heard about it from many of our constituents who said, every contest used to be contested. There used to be 6 candidates per. Well, there's volunteerism is in decline, not just in Scarsdale, but in a lot of other areas of our life as well. And voter apathy is also, things work so people don't pay attention to it. Should we have a crisis in this town? I think a lot of people would be much more interested in being involved, but it's run really well for a really long time by some very smart people. Don't look at me because next year is going to be a little more bumpy, but I'll say this, we are benefiting from our good fortune and things have to kind of get rejuvenated. So it's great to see that everyone in this room is so actively engaged in the thought process because, we are feeling it in volunteer organizations. The new folks got to pick it up. Yeah.
Jenny, go ahead.
Totally appreciate that. So we've heard a lot in the past that people don't like to run if it's a contested election. That sort of scares people away. How were you successful this year in the messaging to get people to run anyways?
we didn't tell them it was contested. No. Frank, you want to handle it or I'm happy to?
I think that that's a part, it's not contested until the final petition comes out. I remember my election, for the CNC, it wasn't contested and then it was contested and I got a pit in my stomach. Part of it also is the CNC reaching out to the candidates and just engaging in that conversation. Say, look, whether you win or lose, you've already improved the life of the community. And part of it's just sort of that, community spirit that has to be engendered in all the communication and just encourage people about what makes Scarsdale such a great place. And the mere fact that they raise their hand is what makes Scarsdale a great place. And so if you're not, engaging the CNC in that constant conversation about what it means to be on the procedure committee, you're not engaging the procedure committee about how great it is to volunteer for Scarsdale, it's a cycle. It just has to be repeated all the time. And, people don't get together like this all the time and have conversations about what it means to participate in Scarsdale. It's all electronic. And if you click on your email, you might get it. But we really do need to have more just touch points as a community so people understand how important it is to be, because we're so disconnected electronically from what it used to be to have a conversation that we're seeing the net result with lower engagement. So I think one thing we did this year was we reversed that trend. And it was a lot of this kind of conversation, like saying the words I just said over and over and over again. But then again, we had the biggest problem I see for the CNC going forward, and I realize I've taken up way too much time, not trying to hijack the conversation here, but I'll say we had so many great candidates this year that did not win. And my message to them is you did win. You were there, you showed up for this town, for your community. It might not feel great today, but please consider running again next year. And every single person that provided criticism to us, guess who's getting the first phone call next year? Them. You have a problem? Great, fix it. I appreciate your feedback. Welcome to the table. Let's get it done. So, we are building lists of people to reach out to, but it still is such a a bespoke, unique effort.
And then I thank you for that. I had a totally different question, which is when you recruit people to the PC that have not served on CNC, do you find that are they still often effective PC members? Like, are they engaged? Or do you find that it's without having that experience, it's less helpful?
I'd say their primary role is really helping us to recruit and making the introductions. And then in most cases, it was, Ralph or myself that had to close the deal. It's hard. It's just, and honestly, like, why do we include people who are not? Because that's what we're told to do. That's in the, that's it. Someone years ago decided that we should include other people. So we do include other people. But I think you hit on the head. It's like, it's hard to be effective. And we tried to do a teaching process to really explain what the CNC is to some of these people and what the PC is and what they do. But end of the day, they really serve to, I think, help broaden our reach. And were we trusting them with, updating documents and things like that? No, because that's not really, they just don't know what they're doing there. But yeah, I think your question is coming from the right place, and I think you knew the answer, and you know the answer, and you're right. It's hard. So yeah, the people who have served on the CNC are much more effective PC members.
Talia? Question. Just listening to you talk about the young people needing to increase their volunteerism. Wondering how many people that you approach for either the PC or the CNC are even familiar with the system? Like, do you approach people who are like, what is this? How does this work? They live in Scarsdale, but they're not even aware of this nonpartisan system.
I'd say majority are not aware. Ralph, you can feel free to jump in too. Yeah.
Look, it depends if they're coming off the CNC, they know. If they're just coming in from like outside, I reached out to a lot of spouses who have board members. Like if you're on a village board member, assessment, architect, parks and rec, whatever, I reached out to like the spouses for those folks because you already have one person in your family and you're just looking for some other complementary part. And so that's part of the strategy. I mean, you have to kind of think through what that great candidate looks like. And to my point being, like, you can convince someone to do something for 5 minutes, but to convince them to see it through to an election is a totally different thing. So you kind of have to be thoughtful about that. Yeah, I don't know. It's really hard.
Right. Now, I'm just wondering, do we still need to engage in more education for the community as a whole? And we've talked about this.
Well, just look at Scarsdale Forum participation. The forum, like that's another thing I think doesn't have the numbers it used to have. There's education in a lot of areas for the things that hold this town together, which really need to sort of like be proliferate. And by the way, those new members who did run, they got crushed. I mean, we lost, like, without exception, I think with maybe of folks who lived here less than 5 years, I think the success rate for their campaigns was statistically much lower than those people who had been here for 10 years. And that makes sense. But it's also, oh, I'm brand new, I'll give it a shot. Someone talked to me and they didn't work out so good. Someone who was a 3rd generation Scarsdalian who had a pretty good network did really well. Does that encompass a diversity of thought into the CNC? I mean, one could argue we tried.
Yeah, I'd say if I agree, like the education process of, I think all town elections needs to be enhanced. I'd recommend, not that you guys need my recommendations, but maybe going out to each of the neighborhood associations. There's a small percentage of the community, but there are actually people who are willing to come out and learn. So like I know, like at least in the Fox Meadow one, like we always have, if it's a Justin or Dara, they're presenting of what's going on in the town. There's no reason that maybe one of you want to go down there and just say, like, these are the elections that happen in town. These are how things work. This is the CNC. This is the PC. This is the school board. I think it would be pretty engaging. You're probably going to hit, a fraction of the town, but it's at least people who are leaving their house to go to these like regional cocktail parties. And I think it's a great audience. These people want to listen, and I think we've had good success, at least at ours. And I think that's actually an interesting thing. If you look at like neighborhood associations across the town, certain are very active and certain have like no participation. Pretty interesting. It actually, from what I understood, it sort of actually rhymes with the turnout that we saw in the election. But it's a great place if you guys want to educate there. I think that'd be awesome, and we'll be supportive any way we can. I'm speaking for Frank there, for Ralph. I mean.
Any other questions before we wrap this up? No, okay. Well, again, thank you, Heath, for returning this year to participate in our information session, and we really appreciate the time that you have spent with us this year and last. And welcome to Ralph, and we hope to see you again next year as we do this annually. Thank you so much for your participation. Thank you for your volunteer service to the community, and thank you for being so thorough and thoughtful in your responses today. And that will conclude our information session, and we will then adjourn briefly and reconvene for our consensus meeting for league members. Thank you all.
Thank you all as well. We do appreciate
you.
it.
Should we be able to look for them to join the group? Stop.
It's done.